Hey guys, welcome back to the Hunter Base Podcast. What do Maverick Hunters do when they're not hunting Mavericks? They recharge, go back to the base, shoot the shit. I'm your host of the most, Zeromaster, and today I have a special guest with me. You may know him from his series, Black Sheep Game Reviews, or They Made a Sequel. He's also part of River City Gamers like I am. It's Blonde Guy Gamer.
Hi, I also edit your videos sometimes, like Power Plays.
Yeah, it's Power Plays and stuff too. Yeah, I almost forgot about that. So, today's topic that we're going to talk about is essentially, we're going to be talking about, how do I phrase this? Micro consoles, clone consoles, and what I like to call old dog new tricks, which means old company making a new console after not making one for a while, kind of thing. So, before we get into the topic, is there anything you want to tell anybody if they've never, for some reason, not heard of you before?
Well, if by chance you don't know who I am, yes. Hi, I'm Blonde Guy Gamer. Like Zero has said here, I've done stuff like game reviews mostly. At least that's what I focus on my channel. I tend to do like stuff that's like, a bit more obscure, a bit more kind of out there. Games that could be considered black sheets is one of my main series. Also obscure sequels, which make people go, wait, they made a sequel? That's another one.
That's why.
But that's my main things. I also do a whole bunch of other stuff too. Like I've done stuff on like Kickstarter games and there's short reviews on that and retrospective on the Tales of games, but that's just kind of scratching the surface.
Yeah, and like you said, he does edit Power Plays. For those of you who are familiar with my Let's Play stuff, he's been on a few as well. So definitely check him out. His YouTube channel is Blonde Guy Gamer. You should be able to find him with a quick search. So, anyways, the topic we're going to start off with. So just to kind of go to explain what the topic is real quick. Essentially, we're kind of in an era now where we've got these little micro consoles like the NES and SNES Classic, with the PlayStation Classic being announced and the Genesis Classic, or Genesis Mini, or whatever they're calling it, is being worked on. There are plug-and-play style consoles that came out before that, like the Atari Flashback or the Sega Flashback by At Games, stuff like that. We're also in an era which was actually for a while, there's lots of clone consoles like the Retron 5, which you own,
That's true.
Or the Super Retro Trio Plus HD, which is a mouthful, but I own that, for example. Or even like expensive Fpga solutions like the Super NT or the NT Mini, or the one we'll probably get into is the Sega SG, or the Genesis, the Analog SG, I guess it's called, their new console. And then, of course, the final thing we have is older companies like Atari, Coleco, and now Intellivision coming back from the dead to make their own consoles. And what that means. So let's start off with probably the most common with these. Let's talk about the micro consoles. So everyone knows probably at this point about the NES and SNES Classic. They're basically system emulated system on a chip. They're basically miniature sizes of the consoles, and they come with 20 to 30 games depending on what you have. And main appeal of them, I guess I would say, is for collectors like us. Or average Joe who remembers, goes, hey, I remember that from 20, 30 years ago. I'm going to get that because it has a bunch of games on it. Or hobbyists is another one. So, we'll start off with, let's just talk about the NES and SNES Classic, because they're the ones that are the most popular. They're the ones that are available now, and how we think it went and what they give it. So you recently got the SNES Classic, and did you get the NES Classic? Or?
Yes, I did. Now, keep in mind, I got these fairly recently because, as you know, as many of you probably know, when the SNES and NES Classics were first unveiled, supply was pretty scarce for these things, to the point where they were being scalped on eBay.
Yeah, exactly.
But in recent months, it's actually finally gotten to a point where you can go to any EB Games. I went to mine to get both of those, for example, and they just have a bunch of them. And it's like, oh, because I saw it, I'm just like, you know what? I'll pick up a Super Nintendo Classic. Why not? And then afterwards, I was like, well, I have the Super Nintendo Classic. I might as well get the NES one too.
for me, it was very much as like, I already own these consoles with these games several times over.
Yeah.
It was just a novelty for me. And also, it's an easy way, for me, it's an easy way to bring, you know, a handful of games with me to, say, a friend's house or something. Like, for example, my buddy Billy, who I've also done Let's Play stuff with, when I went to visit him, I brought my NES and Snes Classic because it was just easy for me to do that. We actually, the Let's Play that's going up right now that you're editing, the Super Mario one, was done with the SNES Classic, for example.
Yeah, if you can tell from like the border and stuff.
Exactly.
And then messing up on the rewind thing, which I had added out.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you want to keep pointing that out, you're welcome to, but I'll just stick over to that. But yeah, it's, for me, it was really just like, it was kind of like I'm a collector, so I wanted them. I can't believe I made this video, but I made it like a small rant video on my channel a while ago about not being able to get the SNES Classic. Yeah. I got up at 6 a.m. I got to Walmart as it opened, and I couldn't get one. Like, the day it was released, I couldn't get one. And this was one of the problems that Nintendo had, is they just couldn't meet the demand. The supply didn't meet the demand. An EB Games that I've become quite friendly with, admitted when the NES Classic came out, they got 2 shipped to their store.
Well, yeah.
2 of them. So, and Nintendo knew people wanted these things. They must have known that people wanted these things. The only thing is, there was a rumor I heard that when the SNES Classic was being considered, Reggie personally said to them, they're like, no, you need to manufacture a bunch of these. People are upset because they can't get their hands on them. We're missing an opportunity to make more money, essentially. So eventually Nintendo Japan wanted to said, okay, we'll make more of them. And I didn't get my SNES Classic on launch, and neither did Blondie, for example. I had to get Angel Halo found them when they got restocked. And sniped it, so he grabbed me one. And then, so my SNES Classic is technically the American version, and my NES Classic, my EV Games had a stock of them. So they just got a restock before, for the holiday season, so I picked one up.
I just think that it's funny that in the past 2 years, when it was like super scarce and everyone was just like, it was like a big like hunting grounds, basically, of like just going around trying to get this. It's like, oh wait, is this in stock? Is this in stock? And then nowadays it's like, oh, there's like 10 in the store now.
The funniest thing is, the way you can tell is my SNES Classic has just English on the back of it, but the NES Classic box has English and French, so you know that I have the Canadian one.
Yeah, the limited edition Canadian version.
Yeah. But yeah, so I like the idea of them because, one, they give you controllers, first off, that are similar to the original controllers.
Yes.
Of course, with a short cord length, but
more so with the NES Classic than the Super Nintendo one. The Super Nintendo Classic is at least a half decent length.
Yeah, it's
the NES
longer.
one. It's pretty short, but
yeah.
But as long as you're set up in a way so that you can like at least have it so you're close enough to the system and your TV, so you know it's not that big a deal. But it can be annoying depending on how you set things up.
And another thing I should mention that I almost forgot, another reason, like, originally I wasn't going to get an NES Classic. I was just like, if I can get one, great. If I can't, whatever. And that was one of those situations where I didn't get one originally, so whatever. The reason I wanted the SNES Classic so badly is because they're finally released Star Fox 2. And that's one of the games you can get with the SNES Classic.
I would say that was kind of one of my main selling points for that, because you can easily play Star Fox 2 like through emulation or even reproduction cartridges of that nature, just to play it. But this is the official, fully released version of Star Fox 2.
Exactly.
And the fact that it's exclusive on this Super Nintendo Classic means that you have an incentive to get it if you're at least a fan of Star Fox and all that.
Exactly. And I believe the version that's on the SNES Classic is different from the leaked one.
Because the version on the Super Nintendo Classic is finalized. Like the one that was commonly leaked and played through emulation and brought into repos and stuff. I believe that's just like it's like a nearly complete but not quite complete version.
Yeah,
it's like a 99% complete version.
So that's the thing too. Like, this is an exclusive version of the game that wasn't available to anybody. So that was one of the reasons why I want it, and probably part of the reason why I made that like in the moment rant video about it, because I'm like my thought was Nintendo hadn't learned their lesson. Like, they hadn't stocked more.
That is true, because because prior to that you had the NES Classic shorts, and then prior to the NES Classic you had people going crazy over trying to get amiibos. And
Amiibos were the first. I think they were one of the first things that Nintendo would just like be like, we're gonna send 2 to a store or a box, or like I remember a box. I know this because again, I'm friends with some people who work at EB Games. A box of Amiibos, the regular size ones, there's 4 in a box. Mm. So sometimes EB Games would get 1 box of Amiibos.
Yeah.
And it was like when they first came out. Now it's not so bad.
No.
If you want an Amiibo, you can get them. But when they first came out, it was like, good luck.
Well, more so for more specific Amiibos than others, because especially, I think they just underestimated the amount of people who actually will want to collect all of those. But we're getting slightly off topic with the Amiibo stuff. But going back to the NES and Super Nintendo Classics, one of the other main incentives for me to get at least especially the Super Nintendo Classic is that the controllers. Now, of course, the controllers are recreated pretty faithfully. But a bonus is that because the inputs that go into the consoles are the same as you would plug into, say, a Wii Remote. Wii Remote,
yeah.
Yes. You can actually use a Super Nintendo Classic to play virtual console games on your Wii or Wii U. And this is actually pretty cool that I found out I was able to do. I was able to play Shovel Knight on my Wii U with a Super Nintendo controller.
That's awesome.
And that makes it all the more better, because that game is very suited for a Super Nintendo controller.
I have Shovel Knight for Wii U.
Yeah, there you go. You can play your 16-bit game with a Super Nintendo controller.
I might stream that, actually. That would be fun. That'd be a fun stream game.
Well, actually, it's more like Shovel Knight's more like 8-bit with like some with like a couple little things.
But I knew what you meant. So.
Yeah.
But anyways, eventually Nintendo smartened up, and just this summer they re-released the SNES Classic, or in spring I think they did, actually. And then, because in summer they re-released the NES Classic, I think. They finally did restock them, and that's when I got mine. I remember there was a hilarious video Game Dave did comparing the original release and the later release. He's like, is there a difference? Let's compare. And there are slight differences with the box, but it's really minuscule stuff. They just updated like the packaging mostly. They
didn't include longer cords for the controllers, and so the NES Classic still only gets the one controller, while the Super Nintendo Classic you get both. You get 2.
The other thing that people were hoping with the re-release is that they'd add a rewind feature to the NES Classic, because it didn't have that feature. I mean, it's not a big deal. I have used the rewind feature. That's how I beat Star Fox and Castlevania 4 for the first time, but
whatever.
I just wanted to play through the game, so that's why. But it's not a bummer that that feature wasn't included in the NES Classic. I still have one. I still play it from time to time, but it's just easy access. That's the part that I love about it. It's easy access to a handful of games from both systems. I don't have to, fudge around getting my Super Nintendo hooked up to like a HD source and all this crap.
And especially with NES, trying to get games working on an original Nintendo console.
Exactly.
Everyone does the blow and the thing.
Yeah. Even
though you're not supposed to, but we do it anyway because old habits.
Yeah, exactly. I still do it even though it's not.
I just do it a little bit, just.
Yeah. The one argument that a lot of people have is, well, why not just get a Raspberry Pi or use emulation on a computer or something like that?
Yeah, some kind of like emulation machine, right?
And the thing that I go with that is that the SNES Classic, much like the Wii and Wii U Virtual Console, uses emulator settings per game. So yeah, if you want to get the same level that those micro consoles can do, you can adjust your emulators to do it, and they'll do it, but you gotta do that for each individual game. And one thing that the test that I did with the SNES Classic is I played Mega Man X. I'm very familiar with Mega Man X. And it's a 1-to-1 like recreation of that game. Like if you handed me a Super Nintendo and then hand me the SNES Classic, and then ask me which one was which, other than the video quality, I would have no idea. Yeah. Like it was perfect, which is funny because the Mega Man X Legacy Collection came out for PS4, and it is not 1-to-1. It's close, but it's not 1-to-1 like the SNES Classic is.
Oh, interesting.
And that's why I still say, yeah, okay. If you want to get a Raspberry Pi, that's totally fine. Or if you want to use your computers and use emulators on that, we've had emulators for years. It's not so much a case of not having availability. I think the main thing is that this is it is a novelty and it is a collector's item, yes, but it's also easy access for people who don't really want to go that extra route. You can also mod your NES and SNES Classic to add more games.
If you so choose to, yeah.
Yeah, but again, you'll be losing that compatibility that's set up for each individual game. So Nintendo spent a lot of time making sure the games played the same way they did on the original system. So, and that's why, usually that's why I recommend that or Virtual Console, or I'm hoping, I don't have the Switch online service yet, but I'm hoping the NES games work the same way. So,
in terms of just playing them yourself, I think it's fine, but I think the only problem with that was that because it uses peer-to-peer connection, if you play like online together, that brings a whole, that's not apparently that good. At least not right now.
I mean, well, they could fix it, whatever.
Maybe, but who knows?
So anyway, the other thing, so that's basically Nintendo. Is there anything else you want to add before we move on to the next part of this topic?
I mean, it's like you said. I already own most of the games that came with the NES and Super Nintendo Classics, or at least the ones that I really would want to own myself. And I do own a majority of them. But I do like the accessibility that these systems do provide. It is essentially just a plug and play thing. It's easy and convenient, and I think that convenience and the novelty of it being like, oh, look at this cute little thing. It's like a little tiny Super Nintendo. You know, it definitely has its appeal to both collectors and to people who were like, oh yeah, I remember playing Super Nintendo back in the day.
Dude, I remember like my birthday party because you were there. My brother had set up the NES Classic on his projector. And I set up the SNES Classic on the TV that's in the same room, so we had games going at both times. And we didn't have to mess around with cartridges or anything like that. Not that, like, that's a inconvenient, I say inconvenience in quotations, that collectors and, like, retro gamers just deal with. But I didn't, like, if I'm having somebody over who doesn't play these kind of games...
Or at least have a good gist of like the most popular Super Nintendo and Nintendo
like
games.
They don't give a fuck about like cartridges and shit. Like they just want to play it. They just want to play the damn games.
And I do. So. And I have to say that the game selection is pretty good for both. Even though I'm not like super into like Tecmo Bowl or whatever, it's fine because you want to include that something like that for variety's sake.
Yeah. So. Another thing I want to mention, I'm just going to mention it. I'm not going to go into it because I plan to do a video on this that's already in the works. I do have also the AtGames Genesis Flashback HD, which is not the best of those, but it is the same idea. It does contain like a bunch of games from Sega, not just Genesis, but Master System.
It's kind of like a hybrid of like a plug and play with already built-in games and a machine where you can take your cartridges and put it in and play it on and play them in HD that way.
Yeah, and the thing is, some people might see that as an advantage, and it is in some point. But some of the games don't handle super well, and again, I'll get to that in a video that I'm working on in the near future. So I don't want to give away too much, but that is also another convenience thing. If Mark from down the street who used to have a Sega Genesis gets one of these and he remembers he has a whole bunch of cartridges in the attic. He can quickly play some games. And I think with the AtGames system, like, it's not terrible in that remark, but again, I'll get more into that when I do my video. I don't want to focus too much on that system particularly, because there's other AtGames stuff we'll have to talk about soon. But
oh boy,
before we do that, just going back into classic consoles again. Another one I don't want to go in too much into depth with because CJ and I want to talk about it as well. But I do want to get your opinion on it, so we'll talk about it. Is the upcoming PlayStation Classic, which has been announced. With finally all the games for it have been announced. In true
Sony tradition. They bring up something that Nintendo has already done, or they're following up after Nintendo.
Yeah, and like I said, the full games list has been announced, and I have, I think it's fine, but I do have some things I wish were swapped out. Like, for example, there's too many like car games on it, I think.
But PlayStation was known for a lot of car games, especially like Gran Turismo, which unfortunately isn't on there, probably because of all the manufacturing licenses because real cars were used in Gran Turismo.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Like a lot of people ask, why no Gran Turismo? Well, they have to license.
Yeah,
these cars,
why no this game or this game or no Tony Hawk? It's like, dude, the soundtrack to Tony Hawk would cost a lot to try and license out.
With Namco doing the licenses with Nintendo for the NES, and I think they did one for the SNES Classic. I figure they would. You figure they would for something like. Do they own Klonoa?
Yes.
Yeah.
That is one of the games I kind of wish was on the PlayStation Classic.
Like I would take out. I know people have. I know SCR would probably disagree with me on this, but I would take Destruction Derby out and switch it in because you can't get rid of Twisted Metal because it's Twisted Metal. I put in Twisted Metal 2, but
but that is true. You already have two games. That's well. Here's the thing, though. I've only vaguely know about Destruction Derby. I never played it, but it's one of those like games where it's like the people who played it back then are really into it. It's like, oh, dude, this is such a big nostalgic game for them.
It's a good game. I like it, but I did not grow up with it. Like,
but people that did they're like, hell yeah, Destruction Derby. That's a game I want on there.
Yeah, and I know that Oni Rokaku, our friend, had mentioned that he would have liked Tomba on there. But I don't even know. I know that it's available as a PlayStation Classic on the PSN store.
I think it was not just a matter of like licensing for the PlayStation Classic, but it was also like picking and choosing a certain amount of games to sort of keep at least a somewhat of a good variety of games, which I think is a decent amount. But there is some. But like you said, there is some bit of games where it's like, why is there a Destruction Derby game when you already have something like Twisted Metal type of
exactly thing? But I mean, there's certain things that had to be on there. Like you got to have your Final Fantasy VII. You've got to have, you got to have like games like you know what I just thought of? Like I know it would be hard to license it now, but there's no Crash Bandicoot or Spyro game on this thing.
Yeah, I think it's probably because of both Activision owning the rights like nowadays for those, and the fact that they're remastering. They remastered Crash, and the remaster of the Spyro games is coming out soon as of this recording. But yeah,
so it's that's a bummer. But they did put in certain games. Like I'm happy they put in Jumping Flash because that's a really fun game, and I'm also happy they put in Wild Arms.
Yeah, I mean,
because that's a good RPG to put in there. I mean, personally, I would have taken Legend of Dragoon, but I have like 3 different other ways to play.
Yeah, well, here's the thing, though: if you're gonna have only 3 RPGs out of like the selection for the PlayStation Classics, and they're interesting choices. I mean, the obvious one, of course, is Final Fantasy VII. It's a very important RPG. They even made RPGs like that popular in the first place, arguably. But then you have Wild Arms, and then you have Persona 1. Yeah. Which is interesting. It's like, oh, okay, Atlas is throwing their hat in there and being like, yeah, here's Persona.
I'm glad it's the Americanized version of Persona 1. I know a lot of Persona fans, and I've seen them write this, that they're upset about this. But guys, come on. That's the version we grew up with. Or not me necessarily, but you grew up with.
Well, the few people that actually played it back then. Yeah. Let's be real. That's actually another incentive for that game, at least, because the original PlayStation version of Persona, trying to get a copy nowadays is kind of pricey. But even then, you can just play your PSP version.
Yeah,
if you want the more updated version.
It's like complaining that if they put Adventure Island on the NES Classic because it's an inferior version of Wonder Boy. You know what I mean? Like that's what it feels like to me. So
well, that's kind of a different thing, but whatever.
But that's stretching it. But like, I mean. The point of this is Sony is trying to sell like Nintendo to people who remember growing up with certain things. And I like the idea of, I mean, and like I said, like Blondie said, unaltered version of Persona 1 is available on PSP, so there are ways to play it.
Yeah, well, you can always argue, even back with the NES and Super Nintendo Classics, it's like, oh, you can just get them on Virtual Console or PlayStation Network.
Exactly.
But I think one stress about the PlayStation Classic that kind of makes people go, well, wait, why should I get this when I can just do that? Is the appeal of the NES and Super Nintendo Classics is that you can play all these old games, in crisp HD on your TV. You don't have to, just do that unless you don't
gotta mod your system. You don't have to get
Virtual Console versions.
Yeah, or you don't have to get HD Retrovision cables, which I plan to get at some point anyways. But that's just because we're beyond. We're in the retro gamer / collector scene, so that's why we'd want.
Yeah, But the point I'm getting at is that with the PlayStation Classic, it's like you can play these games through HDMI, and it's like, okay, cool, but you can do that with any PlayStation 3.
Yeah,
if you have the physical copies,
or you just
buy them on PSN.
Yeah. So I guess some people don't see the appeal of it, but again, it's the same thing with the NES and SNES Classic. It's not like if you already own those games, you're content with them in another form. That's fine. Like, then play that version. This is for people
it is still good for people who don't have the games at all. But for people like us who already have a good amount of the games that we have, it's like you're really just getting it for the novelty of it.
Yeah, Joe Schmo, who grew up with a PlayStation back in 1996, 97, who hasn't played one in like 20, 30 years, isn't going to care about having the physical games. He just wants to play the games.
Although one thing that is a bit puzzling about, I guess it maybe would have to do with like manufacturing costs. But the fact that the PlayStation Classic, and I guess it's aiming more towards like, you know, when the PlayStation was first released type of thing, is that it only has like the regular old PlayStation controller and no DualShocks.
Yeah, I was getting to that. So when I got into the PlayStation, I got in late because I got the PS1. So DualShock was a thing, was already a standard by that point because the PS2 was out, and the DualShock 2 came with analog sticks.
Yeah.
So when we got our PS1, which my dad bought with Canadian Tire money, strangely enough,
that's just
a stack of Canadian Tire money this big.
That's just how Canadian you really are.
Yeah, this just shows how Canadian we really are. But yeah, it came with a DualShock controller because I believe like most of the games from when that came out on just used the DualShock controller. They didn't even worry about people who had an original.
At that point, yes, or at the very least, the left analog stick to move your character around or whatever. But I didn't even get into PlayStation stuff until I really started collecting for PlayStation 2, and even then, that was kind of sort of like in its late life of the PlayStation 2.
So we are late, we were late to the party on the PlayStation.
Well, I'm very late because I don't hear. Well, I guess it's one thing that I could argue about maybe getting the PlayStation Classic for myself is that I actually don't own an original like PlayStation 1 at all. So because I've always just played them on PS2 and PlayStation 3.
It's funny. My brother and I, we sold our PS1 to get. I don't know if it was our PS2 was a gift, but we sold the PS1 for something else. I ended up getting a modded PS1. From a trade with a guy. I traded him a Mac computer for it and an iPod. So, which was funny. That's actually how I got Destruction Derby too, because he gave me a pile of games too.
There you go.
And I recently got a original PlayStation with the serial port in the back. So I do have two different types of PlayStation 1s. One that's just a modded PS1 and one that's an original launch PlayStation. So while I didn't grow up with the system until later, it was one that I finally remember. And to be honest, I haven't played too many games that don't support DualShock. I have played some, obviously, because there's a Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, stuff like that came out originally with the system. But like, it just seems kind of odd that they not do it because they're really limiting the pool of games.
It is because there's games like Ape Escape that you have to use the dual analog sticks, but for the most part, it was still optional. It's like you could still do it, but by 98, the controllers, the dual analogs were standard.
However, one thing that maybe swayed a decision to make it not have analog sticks is that we're not getting the DualShock version of Resident Evil in this. We're getting the director's cut version that doesn't have the fart music. So I don't know how they did it because I think there's some kind of legal thing with the music of that game.
Yeah, there's like a weird story about the composer behind the music for like the director's cuts and all that.
So just the heads like apparently the composer had like a ghostwriter, and so that they were like, we can't use any of the music on any future releases because you didn't write it. So on the PSN store, if you want to get Resident Evil 1, I think it's the DualShock version that's available. That's the only version available unless you get a remake version.
Maybe.
So if you want to get it on the PlayStation store, you have to get it with the, basement music with the fart horns. But what I like about this is I think they stated like, no, this is the director's cut version of Resident Evil. It's coming with this because there's no DualShock, so you can't put the DualShock version on there.
So you won't get that one bad music track that everyone always brings up with DualShock version, which I'm pretty sure the rest of the music is.
I've heard from, I don't know, not you guys specifically, but I've heard from other Resident Evil fans I've talked to that they weren't happy with some of the other music choices.
Yeah, but that's like the obvious like go-to, like, what is this,
But But yeah, so that's one thing that makes me happy. So I don't want to get onto the PlayStation Classic for too much longer. We have a few gripes with the games that are on the options that are on it, but I mean,
a lot of it is personal preference. Like, I would have liked Klonoa and Symphony of the Night and Silent Hill, but but some of those you could argue, like especially with Symphony of the Night getting re-released now on PlayStation 4, and Silent Hill is kind of like in a weird spot.
Medieval remake. That's happening.
True. I hope Medieval would be on the PlayStation Classic, but
yeah. So one last thing I guess we should talk about with it. How do you feel about the price? Because it's $99 US, and that's I think the SNES Classic's $89 US. I think it is.
It was like 100 here, wasn't it?
Maybe it was 100 here. Like, we're in Detroit right now, but in Canada it was $100.
And the NES Classic was 80, I think.
Was 80, yeah. So this
will probably be like 120 or something like that.
Like, how do you feel about $119.99? I guess for the price. That's in Canadian dollars.
Well, it comes with 2 controllers, right?
I think so.
Yeah. I don't know.
I mean, it's just getting to the point where I wouldn't spend that much. Like, I even thought going over $100 for the SNES Classic was pushing it. Like, after tax, I think it was $111 I paid for mine.
Well, yeah. But it's like, but there's still a lot of incentives with the Super Nintendo Classic to sort of validate it. It's like, it comes with 2 controllers with actual decently length cables, and and there's Star Fox 2 on there.
Exactly.
But with the PlayStation Classic, it's like, well, you have a decent variety of games on there. But other than that, it's like, it really is, I guess, for the PlayStation enthusiasts, collectors, and people that like the novelty, or just like, hey, I haven't played PlayStation games in literally 20 years. Might as well,
Yeah,
exactly. Might as well get this.
Exactly.
Because they didn't even got a PlayStation 3 or whatever.
I mean, I'm probably still going to get one. But I mean, it's getting to that. If like, say the N64 Classic comes out and it's like 130 US or 129, that's when I'm like, okay, that's too much. That's too expensive for me. I mean, to be fair, the reason that might make me buy an N64 Classic is because you could play N64 games in high def. Because the N64, like the PS2, is not known for good video quality. It's not.
Well, it's a lot worse than PS2. It's older, but
the N64's video is terrible. Like, it's awful. So, like most of the N64 games I play now, I play the Virtual Console versions because they actually don't look terrible.
Yeah, or there's also a few on like Rear Replay, at least with the updated versions, like for Banjo-Kazooie and all that.
Yeah, exactly. And then there is one other system I want to mention because it recently got its North American release, the C64 Mini. You can get it at EB Games. My EB Games has 1 or 2 of them. That one is more appealing to me because I never grew up with it. And also, they added the ability to load ROMs into it. You can use BASIC, because it comes with BASIC, because it's a Commodore. And you could load games from USB stick into it. And they did that specifically because there's no real way to hook a Commodore tape drive or floppy drive up to
because the Commodore 64 is like, it's kind of before our time in gaming.
And the interesting thing about that one is it comes with 64 games. I mean, I think they did that on purpose. While those games are simpler, like, that's something where I'm like, I never grew up with this, and I'm just getting into like retro computer gaming. Yeah. And to get a C64 now is not, like, you think like an NES or an SNES is hard. Whew. Don't even get started on retro computers. Well,
NES and Super Nintendo are not that hard to find.
No, but like, if like I'm saying, the average person thought it would be difficult. Like a retro computer, unless you knew what you were doing back in the day, like, it's
that's kind of like,
it's hard to get in. So that's one that I probably will pick up in the future. And I don't know if I'll do video on, but I'll talk about it or whatever. So that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see more stuff that is not readily available now. As easy to get into now. Like the C64 Mini, it's not the best option, but it's certainly better than going and getting an original C64 and trying to get all the hookups and stuff for it.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting on my ZX Spectrum Vega Plus, by the way. I'm still waiting. They apparently shipped at the start of this year. I haven't gotten mine yet, so We'll have to find out on that. So let's move away from the micro consoles for a second, and let's talk about clone consoles, because we each own a few.
That's true.
I have the Retron 3. I used to have the Retro Duo, but because somebody, my brother, plugged in the wrong power supply and didn't look, it blew up. And then I recently got the Super Retro Trio Plus HD. And of course, they're very different consoles, but there's a lot of them now. There's a lot of these consoles. So
they're definitely it's definitely tapping into that market of people, for people like us who are like, we want to play our original games, but we want to play them in a way that actually looks good on our TV.
Yeah. So for me, the Retron 3, we'll get into the Retron 5 in a second. Mm-hmm. For me, it was, for those who don't know what an FPGA is, an FPGA is basically a system on a chip that's near perfect comparatively to the original hardware. So the Retron 3 plays NES, Genesis, and Super Nintendo games, and they're nearly perfect to what the original systems could output. It does have some audio issues, like a lot of these FPGA consoles have, like even the Super Retro Trio. I'm pointing because it's right there. I brought it with me.
It's off camera.
My Super Retro Trio has, Super Nintendo has weird audio issues with certain games because of the audio chip that they use, because they can't use the Sony one. It's copywritten. So they have to use a third-party one. But it's I got it mostly because the picture looks good. The Retron I originally got because I didn't have I didn't have a Genesis AV cable, and I could only do it coaxial, for example. I wanted an easy way, so I didn't have to bring 3 systems with me to someone's house. I could just bring the carts and whatnot.
Yeah, that's true.
And so I do still use my Retron 3 for some things, but because it's like a 3-in-1 system, and that's pretty easy for me to use. And it's also compatible with all the controller types, which is something that I really wanted. So
yeah.
And then there's other types of these clone systems, like the Retron 5, for example, which Blondie had recently got, which is emulation based. I think it's Android is what it uses, like a Android version for its software.
Maybe
just like an off Android thing. So the main difference here is, while it's all in HD and it supports like 11 systems or something like that.
Well, if you break it down, it's like it does NES and actually has a separate slot for Famicom games as well. So you can actually you can do import games through that too. Super Nintendo / Super Famicom, so that's for another slot. Genesis, and it has a Game Boy Advance slot, so which can play, of course, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games. Yeah, so that's like 7. And then before, you actually had, if you had like the old power-based converter for the Genesis, you could play Master System games, and that includes the card games as well, because the power-based converter had a card slot as well. And recently, not too long ago, they released an adapter where you plug in the Genesis slot, and you can play Master System games through that, and the card games and Game Gear games. So that's more like 9. 9. Well,
I was close.
About 2. Yeah.
So, like, the Retron 5 is like a Swiss Army knife of consoles almost at this point.
I guess you could say, yeah.
My main problem with something like the Retron 5, though, is because it's emulation based. It's all software based. It's not nearly as perfect, and you did have some issues when you first got your Retro, because you got your second hand.
Well, yeah, I did. Well, here's the thing, though. I got it secondhand at Con Bravo, because it was during like a game like swap meet type of thing, or an event that kind of went down. Got a lot of good games from that too. But so what happened was that when I tried to do certain games on it, for example, when I tried to do Mega Man X on it, it like bugged out, and then all of a sudden I was like, well, wait, what is even going on? You know, because at one point I was like a Chill Penguin stage, and then I tried to defeat him, and then he just dies, and I'm like at the level select, and then when I select the level select again, I was suddenly on the freeway beginning stage. I'm just like, what is going on?
Yeah.
It turns out that there were some bugs and issues in its initial release. Yeah. However, you can update it with with firmware updates, you download onto an SD card and then you install it into the system.
Yeah, and that's one of the advantages of going the emulation route with the Retron 5 is it can be updated. So if there are problems, they can be fixed.
Yeah. So most of the initial issues when it was first released have been resolved because of that.
Mm-hmm. So that's a good advantage. To me personally, like if the reason I never got into the Retron 5 is one, I think it's too expensive. Like it starts at $150.
Yeah, admittedly, the main reason I got mine is because it was secondhand and it was at a pretty discounted price.
Yeah. So
I got it for a good deal, basically.
Yeah, so it starts at $150 Canadian for one of those. The built-in controller's okay.
Oh, the controller comes with is not good.
Yeah.
Luckily, like with all Retrons, you can just plug in the real controllers.
Yeah,
so.
It does have GBA, which is nice because there's unless you have Game Boy players are getting harder and harder to get with the disc, even though there is a workaround for that. But and I like It's useful because it's just, like I said, it's a Swiss Army knife for consoles. You can just plug it in and you could basically play up to 9 consoles if you have all the...
It's handy for someone like me too who just wants to just record like old games in HD. Because if I have the games, I'm just like, well, because otherwise I would like to either do like composite video or do S video with some systems that I have S video for. And do it through converters and other stuff I want to record in 720p, and even then it's like stretched down after recrop it and editing and stuff. It was doing it with the Retron 5 is less of a hassle.
So yeah, and that's fine. Because it's emulation, for me it's just like my thought is for me, I can just go the, like I said, RetroPie or, emulator. I have a modded Wii, for example. Just go the modded Wii for this stuff. Now, it does use the original cartridges, and you have to keep the original cartridge in the system while you're playing it, but it's not playing it from the cartridge. It's dumping the data to the system.
It basically just takes the cartridges, it takes the ROM off of them, and then it plays the ROM.
Essentially, yeah. And the only reason I have a problem with that is not because, I don't think it's convenient or whatever. I would probably use the Retron 5 in that case if it, it's just one of those things where I'm I have a route for emulation, so that's why I don't really want to get it, and it's just too expensive for what it does. If it was FPGA based, which would be a miracle of modern technology, then I would totally get a Retron 5. But it's not. So it's one of those things where it's the only thing I'm really convinced I'm getting is I can play it off the original cartridges. So and I mean that's not a bad thing. Like I said, we said with the NES and NES Classic. Some people are going to want that, and that's totally cool. It just doesn't work for me in that situation.
But that being said, there are still some advantages for doing in the method that the Retron 5 does it, where it takes the ROMs. I have a couple games where the save data doesn't work on it. I play on my Retron 5, and I can say and the save data will be on there eternally.
Yeah, exactly.
And there is also some other stuff that you can do with that too, with the Retron 5 as well. For example, as I said earlier, I do a Tales of retrospective, so I'm a Tales of fan. If you know Tales of Fantasia, the only version we got that's any playable is the Game Boy Advance version, and that version, while it's it's doable, it's playable, the sound quality is just garbage because of the port they did just dump it on the Game Boy Advance, and the sound processing on the Game Boy Advance is just doesn't really mesh well with Tales of Symphonia. However, there is a workaround you can do if you have a Super Famicom copy of Tales of Fantasia, and you can play it. Of course, you can play imports on it, but of course it's an RPG. It's all in Japanese. You won't be able to read or understand it unless you somehow know the language. But if you take the SD card and put in English patches into it, you can actually install English patches like fan-made patches onto the game itself, and then you can play the game in English that way. It
doesn't burn it to the actual cartridge. It just when you select the game, it lets you select the translation if you want.
Yeah, when you can go in settings and select select patch, and then It may take a little bit of tinkering to get it just right, but once it works well.
Mm-hmm. And that leads me to a question I'll probably ask you off camera because I don't want you to reveal anything about your retrospective here, especially if you're still working on episodes.
Well, of course,
but I'll ask you about that later. But yeah, that's another way that it's advantageous because, like, I know people who have European copies of or not Europeans, Japanese copies of Secret of Mana or Seiken Densetsu 2.
Yeah, because getting like Famicom, Super Famicom versions of some games is easier and cheaper. Like I got the Japanese Famicom version of Ninja Gaiden 3, for example, because not only is it a bit cheaper, the version we got has dumb stuff like limited continues and things like that. They make it way harder than it needs to be.
Or just, since we're talking about it, Seiken Densetsu 3, which is a good example, which if you want to play it on the original Super Nintendo, you're either going to get an original Japanese cartridge or you're going to have to get an expensive, what do you call them? A reproduction card with the translation on it.
Yeah, because reproduction cartridges are fine, but they tend to be a little bit pricey.
Mm-hmm. With the Retron 5, you don't got to worry about that. If you have a copy of the Japanese version and you have an English patch you prefer, just pop it in and it'll do it. So,
yeah,
I think that is an advantage to it that would make me almost want it. It's still too expensive for me.
Well, if you got it for the price that I did, I think you would. I think you would get it.
Yeah.
But of course, you would have to come across it on a game, a swap meet or something at a convention.
Yeah,
like I did.
The price that I would pay probably for a Retron 5 is around the $70 range, and that's kind of what I feel is fair.
Less than half even.
Well, you know what? Let me put it this way: the amount I would pay is probably the amount I pay for the Retron 3, which is about $80. That's probably what I would pay for it. Now,
okay, well, because I basically paid $90 for mine. So
okay.
I'd say
that's pushing it, but I could see myself paying that much for a Retron 5.
Okay.
So yeah, me personally, that wouldn't work out, but there's tons of people who are like, the Retron 5 got me back into retro gaming because it's simple, it's easy, you have all the systems there, and
if you have a decent game collection of like all the old games from the systems, it's good to just be like, because you don't want to like hook up all the systems and like into a TV, especially on an HD TV, and then it will look kind of bleh on it.
Exactly. But there's also the other option, which we were talking about originally, which was now a lot of FPGA consoles. What I mean, like clone consoles now can do HDMI. Some can do 720p, 1080p. There's like a million Super Nintendo and NES clones out there. I think Retrobit, or not Retrobit, sorry, Hyperkin actually makes a Retron 1, which is just an NES that does out HDMI.
Yeah, I think they kind of did that in response to like the NES Classic, because it's like, well, if people want to play just NES stuff, then here's an option. And
again, those are FPGA based, so if you're like me and you're just like, oh, I don't really need the Retron really for much, and you want to play it in something that's close to what the original systems can do, then that's an option as well. The cream of the crop with these is what Analog does. Analog is a company, they made the Analog NT, which is, I would call the Cadillac of clone consoles, because it's a $500 NES and Famicom, but it is not only 100% compatible with the Super Nintendo, or sorry, the Nintendo and the Famicom. It has the enhancements that an emulator has, but it's not emulation. It's hard to explain because it's all on the chip. Like you can add scan lines and stuff, but of course it's $500.
Not everyone's going to be willing to pay that much unless they're like really like super enthusiastic about the NES. And
one thing that upset people, some collectors in the early days, is the early Analog NTs, the more expensive ones, were basically gutted from Famicoms and NESs. And I know a lot of people had issues with that. The newer one, the NT Mini, which is about half the price, is all original stuff. Like they didn't use any original stuff from the Famicom or the Nintendo. They used the FPGA stuff that Chemtress has come up with. If you don't know who Chemtress is, he's this guy who's like a genius of hardware programming, and he's been able to get system on a chips for almost any. I think he's gotten up to Dreamcast for system on a chip. with the exception of Saturn, because Saturn's hard to recreate because of its processors and whatnot.
Yeah.
But he's been able to get up to that point. Like basically the enhancements that have happened in the last 5 to 10 years with clone consoles basically come down to him because he's the one who does a lot of these programming. So, Analog has their Mini NT, which is the same idea, but again, it's not actual systems. It's just they used an FPGA that was programmed to work for Nintendo. So it's hardware based like Nintendo or Famicom with all the enhancements that come with it. Then they made the Super NT, which was even cheaper than the Mini NT and the Analog NT, which is Super Nintendo. And again, it does HDMI as well as all these systems do HDMI, by the way, and analog. So it does both. Same thing with the Super Nintendo. It's a system on a chip that's 100% compatible with the original Super Nintendo and has the enhancements an emulator would give you, all in a hardware system that's the same as a Super Nintendo. But those are the most expensive options. I think the Super NT's like $139, $149 in price. So it's basically, if you're like, I want the best, picture quality, the best compatibility, and I want to feel like the original systems I played, that's the price you got to pay, essentially, if you want all three of those things together.
Yeah, if you want this, if you want like the closest authentic experience you could possibly get out of getting the best picture quality, if you're like super like really want to get the best out of it type of thing.
Exactly.
For videos or whatever.
That's why I call them the Cadillac of like clone consoles, because
that is a good comparison.
You pay for what you get, what you pay for, though.
Yeah.
They have a new system coming out soon. I think it's called the Analog SG, or the Mini SG. Which, here's the interesting part about this one. It is a Sega Genesis clone in the same vein that the Super NT is a Super Nintendo clone. However, they're going to have compatibility with not just Genesis and Mega Drive, but with Master System. And it's supposed to have Sega CD compatibility.
Ooh, that's interesting.
And they're talking about Sega 32X. So
because Retron 5 doesn't do 32X.
Mm-hmm. So that interests me because it's like the Sega CD, while not hard to emulate.
No, it's certainly not. You can literally just put the CDs into your CD drive and emulate off of those.
Yeah, it's one of those systems where it's like there's not a lot of options for playing them, and there's many Sega CD games you'd want to play in high definition, but
there's a surprisingly decent amount if you dig deep. Trust me, I have to.
I've also heard that there's going to be a way to do patching similar to the Retron for Sega CD, because there are versions of Sega CD games that are vastly superior to the original retail versions. So, for example,
like Night Trap?
Night Trap or Mad Dog McCree, where you can patch it to use the higher quality FMVs rather than the ones that came on the disc kind of thing.
Right.
So there is that option too. The other thing that's interesting, I forgot to mention about the Super NT, is it can use there's an enhancement that was made in the hacker community that you can use Red Book audio with Super Nintendo games.
Oh.
So it supports that.
Okay.
As well. So it's weird. They're hardware consoles, but you can update them as well, like the Retron, and add things to them. But of course, again, you pay, you get what you pay for. The Sega SG, or whatever they're calling it, the Analog or Mini SG, it's going to start at $189 American. Okay. So, and I think the reason is because they're including so many systems into it. You can do Genesis, Mega Drive, Master System, 32X, Sega CD, all in this one.
Basically
system.
Everything that you could possibly play on a Genesis and everything that was attached to it.
However, you need the add-ons. That's the thing. So you do have to own a Sega CD.
You have to own a
32X.
So you need the CD attachments, or either CD attachments, a 32X, and the power base converter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what it sounds like. Now, they have not said if the Retron 5 adapter is going to work with it, but because it's not hardware, I don't think it's going to work.
Yeah, I don't.
Because I don't think if your Retron adapter would work in my system. I don't think it. I
think it's specifically made for it to be like. I think it's meant to be kind of like it could sort of acts as a power base converter on it. Yeah. Even though it does add Sega Game Gear support, but even then, that's even then, that's not. I think that's just based off of the emulation as well. Because
there
was one Game Gear game that I tested on it that didn't work, and it was like a Golden Axe spinoff called Axe Battler, and for whatever reason that just didn't work on that converter.
Interesting.
But the rest of my Game Gear games did work on it. That was like the one game where I'm just like, what? I'm not sure if they'll update it, but
I'm sure they will.
Maybe it's been out for the thing's been out for a year though, and I haven't seen any newer updates.
Well, I mean, maybe it just needs to be bug report. You may have to bug report that one.
I guess.
But back to the Mini SG, I think another rumor is, and again, this is still a rumor because they haven't confirmed much yet, that they are going to make their own attachments. So if you don't own a Sega CD or a 32X, you can get an attachment from them for an additional fee with it, but it will work with your original Sega CD and 32X.
So it will work with my original Sega CD.
So for someone like you, if it,
I don't have a 32X though, so that's.
But for someone like you who has Sega CD, I know this is an expensive console, but it'd be something you could use with your original Sega CD.
Honestly, though, if I were to do something Sega CD related nowadays, I would just put the discs in my computer and just run it off an emulator.
Yeah, because
that's like it's super easy to do, and I'm still using the real games and all that, just like I am with the Retron 5, and it's pretty much my way to just record in HD. So
again, this is mostly for the high-end collector enthusiast market, less for the and a little bit the hobbyist market too. So would I want a Mini SD? But not at that price right now. At least not until I'm making more money. So, it's one of those things where it's like, this is cool. And this is, the part of me that is excited about this is where, the retro scene is going, like the hobbyist retro scene is going. Like we're getting to the point now where we can say we have something that's better than the original, in a lot of regards.
Yeah, because that's using like the that's like it's basically using hardware to do all that stuff, right?
Essentially,
and and I personally I don't think like using software to run those games is bad for the Retron 5. You can argue a little bit about some discrepancies about it, and there actually was a little bit of heat behind like about because apparently the Hyperkin used it was basically like free emulators.
Yeah, freeware open source.
Like open source emulators. That's the way I was.
But I mean, like I'm not like that part. I don't really care about.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not like too super concerned anyway. But there's still people who comment about about the Retron 5 stuff being like, "Oh, they scammed us. They're using." I
don't know.
They're using these free emulators and making money off of it, which is apparently. But it's sort of like it's kind of like one of those, I guess, maybe grayish areas, but.
And
I don't know.
And I mean, like, it doesn't, like, using emulation doesn't bother me either. A lot of the gameplay I've recorded for some things have been emulation. I have a modded Wii that I've used openly for videos. Yeah. I mean, sometimes, like, by accident hitting the menu button or something like that. But emulation I'm totally fine with. Is the main sticking point for me with the Retron is the price point. Like if I want to buy one new and then get the adapter, I'm looking at a $200 investment at that point.
That is true if you go for like brand new, because even though the Retron 5's been out for a few years now, like you said, it's still a bit pricey.
And RetroPie has become so easy to use, and Launchbox and all these things that it's not too difficult for somebody even with limited technical knowledge to get their hands on a Raspberry Pi, install Raspbian and then install RetroPie on it. And it works in a very like Netflix style, like tile thing where you can choose your games and systems. So that's not as difficult. So for me, it's just like I could spend, $60 and get a Raspberry Pi and then have to do some work, or I can spend $200 and use my original cartridges on an emulator anyways. So that's kind of where I'm at. And that's kind of where stuff where analog is kind of in the middle, because they're like, we're the best of both worlds, but you're going to pay for it.
Yeah, it's all these different factors, and it depends on like how much you're willing to pay, how much you care about emulation and versus playing the real thing, how much
Yeah, I know what you were trying to say there.
Lost my train of thought there.
One more thing I want to talk about analog before we finish up is they have also hinted at a possible Game Boy NT thing coming out. A handheld, per se, that they're going to do that has HDMI out as well. So I don't know how that's going to work, but it is something they've hinted at. So,
well, I mean, if a Sega Nomad can play out into a TV,
yeah, I think the idea is the idea people are speculating is that it is a handheld, but it'll have a button to switch to a console mode where you can plug in controllers and an HDMI port into it, or an HDMI cable into it, so that you can play it on a TV. So that's what people are speculating they're going to do, because I mean, it's definitely possible. FPGA technology has gotten crazy in, like I said, the last 5 to 10 years. So, to the point where like I could see Analog doing an N64 thing soon. Like that's probably the next step for them.
Hopefully in time with the N64 Classic.
Yeah,
if they're going to do
announced. That's pretty much all we really need to say about clone consoles at this point. Like they're useful, but they do come with asterisks, unless of course you're going with Analog. The company Analog, not the connection. Anyways, the last thing I want to talk about is old companies getting back into the fray. Like, for those of you who heard about the whole mishap with the Coleco Chameleon, which was a console that literally didn't exist. Essentially, a company had bought the name Coleco. They decided to use it for their console. They used the molds from the Atari Jaguar.
Oh yeah,
that they bought.
That was a weird mismatch of events.
And they were just being very sneaky about it. And it turns out it didn't exist. And in the end, like they went to CES and they took the guts of the SNES 2 and put them in it. And then they showed a picture of it with a clear case, and somebody identified it was a graphics card or something like that. So it already had a bad rep.
No kidding.
All the way through. So that project just died off eventually. More recent is Atari has come into the fray again. So again, somebody bought the Atari name, and they're trying to make their own new home console that's supposed to have both retro and modern games on it, which I don't understand how that's going to work.
Oh, is it like the At Games Genesis thing where it's just like they threw in a bunch of random
I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to get newer versions of older games. Like the biggest thing that came out is, well, first off, they have two controllers. They have one that looks like your typical Xbox 360 style controller, and then they have one that's like the classic Atari controller, and they're both wireless.
Okay.
And they do work with PCs as well. So, that's one of their big things. So you can buy the controller separately too if you wanted to get it. So,
right.
So this console they're making, this Atari, they're calling it the VCS, which annoys me because that was the original name of the 2600. Just give it a new name. Just call it the Atari Neo or something stupid. Like, I don't care. They're starting off on the Indiegogo at $300 for this console. And they're promising retro and new versions of retro games. The big problem with this is the controversy they received was they showed off a video of games being played on it. But one of the games they showed was Tempest 3000, which has not actually been programmed for the console yet. The guy who made Tempest 3000 said, I haven't gotten a kit to make my game for this. They're probably playing the PC version of Tempest 3000, which it turns out they were. And there was other clips of people using a controller with a TV in the background and the button inputs not matching what's happening on the TV.
Oh.
So this is another one of those, people are saying, okay, this might be another Coleco Chameleon situation. Like, fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, shame on you kind of thing. So a lot of people are starting to pull their money from the Indiegogo to say, I'm not giving you $300 to, make vaporware here. So, however, the biggest difference between the Coleco Chameleon and the Atari VCS is the Atari VCS does exist. It does exist in some form. It's just, we still don't know anything about it. They're not giving us all the information. I think that's the reason why people are pulling out too, because they're like, if you got to give me something. We don't know what the specs are. We don't know, what games are coming on it. Like, they're expecting people to invest money into something that we don't know anything about. And they still haven't really told us much about it. And this whole controversy thing was months ago that this happened. So you'd think they would have, started telling us more about what it is.
Do some damage control, communication.
Because it was one I considered backing on Indiegogo, but I was like, 300 was too much for me at the time. I'm like, that's too much money for another console right now. I can't afford it. And I'm kind of glad I didn't, because I had the same idea with the Coleco Chameleon. I thought it was going to be an extra thing, and I backed off. I'm like, I don't know enough about this. And just getting back to like a point I made before, the ZX Spectrum Vega Plus, I backed it like 4 years ago, and I still don't have my console yet.
You would think there'd be like better quality control with like in regards to these old classic classic IPs of these companies and the games that are associated with it. Because obviously Nintendo is Nintendo, and everyone else has their own stronghold on it.
Yeah.
But but because these super old video game companies, where it's like it seems like with like the really old game stuff, like with the Atari and the ZX Spectrum and the Coleco and all that, it's like are the actual main companies? I think for the most part they're still around, right?
Not really, no. Like
Not
Atari
really.
went under. Like Atari got merged in with I can't remember. But no, it's these companies. They're not the original companies. Like Coleco died in '89.
Okay, yeah. But it is one of those things where it's like you're kind of taking like the old namesakes of and people who probably remembered all these old systems. And it's like
it's almost like being taken advantage of, is what it is. Like, that's a strong phrase for me to say, but that's almost what it's like. Like they're using the name to try to sell branding power to people who remember these things. Which brings me to the next point, which is the Intellivision Emiko, which was recently announced. And there's a few things to note about it. A lot of the original people from the Intellivision company. Because the Intellivision company's been around. Like, it never died. It separated from Mattel in the 80s and became its own thing. And they've been making clone consoles and stuff for a while. Like little Flashback things. I think they had a deal with At Games for a little bit. And the Intellivision Flashbacks is actually really good, from what I hear. They've released the Intellivision Lives compilation on Xbox, PS2, stuff like that. They've released their games again in many forms. Okay. So... And the Blue Sky Rangers, which for those of you who don't know who the Blue Sky Rangers are, they were the cream of the crop developers in Mattel for the Intellivision. They were the people who understood it the most. They're also still with the company, except for, unfortunately, one of the original developers did pass away last year. So he's the only one who's not. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he's no longer part of. Obviously, part of the company because he passed on. But a lot of the original people involved with the Intellivision are involved with the Intellivision Emiko. And the company's been reorganized a little bit with its new CEO, Tommy Tallarico.
That's
the video game composer and the Video Game Music Live guy. And he recently did an interview with Re-Rez on this new console, because basically what the Intellivision Emiko is. It's going to have original Intellivision games on it. It's going to have new 2D games on it that they're going to start off exclusive to the Intellivision and then might be available on other platforms. It's going to be using controllers that are like the original Intellivision controller. However, instead of it being a keypad and a disc, it's a disc and it's like a touchscreen. So it'll have the way Tommy explained it is that its developer wants you to make you hold a controller this way, this way, this way, or this way. Like, they can do that just with programming is what they're planning to do. They've already, they've announced it. It's not coming out until 2020.
So quite a while.
A while. But they're already working on dev kits. They're already sending stuff out. This is a real thing that's happening.
It definitely sounds like they're going all in for that.
Yeah, and the difference here with Atari and Coleco is the Intellivision company never went away. It just went away from Mattel.
And it's not been like picked up by people and be like, well, what can we do with this? You know?
Exactly. The only restructuring is now that Tommy's the CEO, he's restructured it to be less of let's release a game compilation every couple of years to let's make a console and make this a whole thing. The things that have me worried are, one, with other things like the Coleco Chameleon and Atari VCS, we don't know how legit it is until we see something.
Yeah, because there is that stigma of people who are like picking these old system things up and trying to sell them out to people, but they're kind of doing it in a bit of a shady way.
Yeah. Two, they had said originally the trailer had set off that it was 2D only. Tommy came back and said that's not the case. It's the focus is on 2D games, but if a developer wants to spend the time to figure out how to make a 3D game on the system, then the way he compared it is to the Sega Saturn. Its like the Sega Saturn originally, I think Sega's intention was to make more 2D games, and then when they realized 3D was the thing, they're like, "Oh crap, we need to make 3D games for this."
Yeah.
So he basically said, "We're gonna 2D games are going to be the easiest to make for the system, but 3D can be made. It's just going to be a lot more difficult. So it depends what the developers want to spend their time doing."
Right.
The other thing that has me a little concerned is at the beginning, all games are going to be between $2.99 and $7.99 in cost. So that's fine for some things, but my thought is the games that they should be trying to get to this are those like retro style indie games. Like Owlboy should be on this thing, is what my thought would be. Like Owlboy, or try to get Shovel Knight or something like that.
Well, like, is it that high quality of like 2D style games that they're going to aim for this system? Yeah,
that's what they're aiming for, but they're focused on exclusives right now. But it would have been personally, I think they should have reached out to some third parties at like Yacht Club Games and say, "Hey, we'd love to have Shovel Knight on our system. Here's a dev kit, can you do it?" kind of thing. Like, just as an example. Like, they're really taking the Nintendo approach and focusing on first party first, which is fine. Yeah. And he said it's not to say we're not going to have third party games that are available on other systems. He's like, we're just focused on first party stuff and exclusives first, so that people will want to pick the system up. So that's one thing that just sort of worries me. Like, when this trailer came out, we should have seen like logos from companies that already are on board with making this thing. Because I'm sure you like this. Like, I'm sure there's companies that would love to like re-release things like that. Capcom beat 'em up collection. I could see that being on the Intellivision Emiko, like something like that. But they just they're not, because it's not exclusive, I guess. So I'm not sure about that.
It definitely seems like more sort of like almost like a niche thing where it's like this is going to be like an indie, I guess, console.
The other thing that's concerning to me is they're focused on making all games E for everyone. So no M-rated games, no T-rated games. And, they had asked, because Tommy had said, what about, having, exclusives versus like having stuff third party, stuff like that. He had said, yeah, that's going to happen. But this is the sticking point. He wants the console to be family oriented, which is fine. Because Tommy, let me put it this way. Tommy's first console was the Intellivision. And the way he remembers it is he didn't just play it. His cousins, his mom, his dad, his aunt,
his whole family, basically.
Aunt Jemima, whatever, played it. Like, everyone played it. He saw it as a family thing. But as gaming has gone on, it's become more and more about, gamers. And he wants to bring that family focus back, which is fine. But personally, I think the people who are going to buy this thing are going to be people who remember the Intellivision name or are already gamers. Like, not people who grandma's not going to buy this.
Yeah, it's like a lot of families will be like, "Oh, we'll just get an Xbox or a PlayStation."
Yeah, exactly.
And the more family friendly focused stuff tends to be more towards Nintendo, of course.
It's like if you're a parent and you've got 2-3 kids and they want a game system, you're probably going to go for the PS4, the Xbox, or more likely the Nintendo Switch, because then that way, it's their established brands. And I'm not saying Intellivision isn't, but unless you grew up in the 1970s, you don't know what Intellivision is.
Or 70s, like early 80s?
Like the Intellivision's even too old.
Oh yeah, like I said before, like Commodore 64 and Intellivision, Atari, that era is past
past us. The only reason I know about Intellivision and like it is because my dad had one and I found it in a box one day. Like the only reason I have it in Intellivision is because it's my dad's and he just doesn't care and said I could have it. So
yeah, sure.
So while I'm excited for the Intellivision Emiko, I'm just concerned that the thought process is, instead of marketing this for the people who are going to buy it, let's market it for the people who might not buy it, in my opinion. And Tommy, God bless his soul, the man is an amazing musician and everything, and obviously
Terminator Sega CD.
Whatever. Obviously, he has an idea about it, but it's just it just to me doesn't seem like this is going to be the console again that grandma buys for when the grandkids come over to play or whatever, or the system she's going to play. You know what I mean? The Wii was special, it was lightning in a bottle, and when Nintendo tried to continue that with the Wii U, they failed because anybody who wasn't a gamer didn't really know what to think of it.
Yeah, because the
marketing was bad.
Yeah, because people really thought, oh wait, is this just an upgrade to the Wii?
And Tommy's response to that too was that we're gonna do the advertising so people know what it is. I hope to God you do, Tommy, because honestly, I don't think anybody outside of the gamer is gonna want this thing.
Or not know exactly what this is. It's like television. What that kind of
thing. The recommended sales price for it right now is $189. Again,
that's not like at least it's
not terrible.
It's not expensive. It could be an event. It could be an advantage where it's this is actually a cheaper
I know, and
console you can get.
That is an advantage. But I think the other thing is that while it's a cheaper price, it's still not an established brand in terms of mainstream gaming success. So. Yeah, except for what do we get little Bobby for Christmas? What do I get my little son Bobby for Christmas? Do I get him, the $400 PlayStation 4? Or do I go with this $189 console I've never heard of, but it's cheaper? While parents look for, cheaper alternatives to get their kids stuff.
And the employee in the Best Buy will tell them, well, on the PlayStation 4, you can get them this game and this game and this game. And
their kids have probably told them a million times, I want to play Minecraft, or I want to play Fortnite, or I want to play these, they'll hear the buzzword games, they'll be like, well, this is the one I have to get because this is going to have the games my kid wants to play. And again, parents these days are our age or only slightly older. A lot of them don't remember the Intellivision. So unless there's some parent out there in their 40s or 50s and is like, oh, well, I remember Intellivision. That was a good brand. I'll buy one of those for my kid or I'll buy one for me kind of thing. It's not something that, parents of today, if this had come out 20 years ago, I could see it doing really well. But coming out now is kind of a thing where it's I don't know. I don't know how to feel about it. I want one. I know that. But I don't think it's going to be the success that Tommy's anticipating it is. And that's the
that he wants it to be this hey, this is the thing that families are going to really enjoy. Yeah. But it is one of those things where it's it definitely sounds like it's going to be a very niche thing.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And I think that's
as much as Tommy Reed doesn't want it to be.
Yeah, and I think that's the market they should go for. Make
concentrate on the core gamers that will definitely want it type of thing.
And they're and retro gamers, and hardcore gamers or whatnot, they'll spend the money on things like this. That's why the analog NT is so popular. Because it's because people want, they want to have their games in the best possible played way imaginable. So, gamers will spend the money. They'll spend the money for this console, especially if there's a good amount of games coming out for it too. But trying to convince mom and pop to buy this console, I think is a misstep. in my opinion. Now, I could be 100% wrong, and the marketing could be fabulous.
And the games could be something where families can go, oh, what's this?
Yeah.
We'll play along.
If my next door neighbor knows what an Intellivision Emiko is, I'm going to be surprised. Over a PlayStation 4 or an Xbox One. You know what I mean? Like, if my neighbor down the street knows what it is, I'm going to be surprised. Like, it's just, outside of it being the Intellivision branding, I just don't see how this is going to sell well with the non-gamer market. Like, or the non-retro enthusiast market, stuff like that. It just seems like it's a little out there. I mean, Tommy proved me wrong. Like, I'd love to be wrong on that. I'd love it to be a success. I'd love it to be a competitor with the new consoles. I mean, competitor in terms of 2D, not 3D, obviously, or VR or anything like that. But
a competitor in that sort of like, at the very least, this is very unique in that it's like kind of like a new, like I said, it's like a new indie console where it's like it's not aiming to be a competitor, obviously, to the current consoles we have now. It's sort of like a little subset of like, oh yeah, this is something where like a bunch of exclusive indie games can be played on it. It's like, huh.
I think I have a good way to say this. The Intellivision Emiko could be the iPod Nano of the gaming industry, meaning it's the iPod that the person who doesn't want the expensive one buys. Like, you know what I mean?
As someone who owns a Nano, that actually kind of hits home.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't mean to rag on it. Like, the iPod Nano is a good product, but like, it's like that's not the main consumer market. That's why I'm saying it. I'd love it to be like I said, the iPod Nano of the gaming industry. That'd be great, but I just have this fear that there's a little too much optimism going in that we're going to sell this thing to moms and dads, and they're going to want to play it with their kids and stuff. Yeah. And like I said, like the Wii was lightning in a bottle. The Wii shouldn't have been as popular as it was, but it was. And
it definitely blew up.
And it's hard to say what made that what it was, other than the obvious things, the motion controls, the ease of use, stuff like that. But I just don't want to see the Intellivision Emiko be something that goes in the closet in a year. You know what I mean? I don't want it to be which is what a lot of Wiis were outside of the gamers out there who had them. So
you don't want it to be an Ouya.
Yeah, you definitely don't want it to be an Ouya. And that was one thing as well. I almost backed on Kickstarter. I almost did. I was like, this is gonna be great. I was like, fuck.
So did a lot of people.
But yeah. I'm hoping for the best. I still want an Intellivision Emiko when it comes out, but I don't know if I can wait 2 years. It's too long.
Well, we still gotta wait and see. Yeah, obviously.
I'd like to see more, I guess, is what I should say, with a lot of this stuff.
Maybe they'll slowly unveil some stuff in the next year.
Yeah, that'd be nice. So, but yeah, that's. Is there anything else you want to talk about in terms of that, or anything else you want to get your opinion on in the topics we talked about?
No, I mean, I've only had really experience with the classic systems release, NES and Super Nintendo classics, like,
and then the Retron 5,
and then the Retron 5. So that's really my foray into that plug and play and clone system type of things.
But the reason I wanted to have you on is because you are a retro gamer and collector. So finding easy ways to play these games, or is something that we all strive to do, and recording as well.
Yes, especially since we do YouTube stuff with games. Yeah.
There is one more thing I want to talk about before we finish. I mentioned at one point At Games. Recently, a new system came out from At Games that they actually sent review units out to a few people, including the immortal John Hancock, who reviewed it because it was a Namco plug and play thing that had like 8 arcade Namco games on it. So he reviewed it and he gave it a good, review and whatnot. And John Hancock's one of those guys who he's so familiar with Sega stuff that he knows what At Game products to recommend and which ones not to. Like he tries to give like both sides of the coin, which is what I like about him, because he's being honest about it, but he's also not like saying this is the worst thing ever, blah, 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 whatever. So that's what I like about him. So he got this unit and had the arcade games, but when they released it, it had NES versions of those games on it.
Right.
So the only reason this became big is because some guy, I think it's Mad Little Pixel was his name, did a review as well and revealed there's NES games on this, not arcade ones. So John Hancock came back and bought one, and did a video comparing them, and the NES ROMs aren't even done well on the thing. So, like the other the ad game system I'm going to be doing a video on, there's problems. Not just the fact that the wrong games are on them. And of course, ad games handled the situation with blocking people and calling them names.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like they handled it well.
Not at all. And I think, I don't know if they're bitter because Sega pulled out with them with the Genesis Mini.
It does sound like it, because that kind of is one of their main issues when they did the Sega stuff, is that their quality was a little...
Some of their stuff was good. Some of their stuff was good.
I won't say that all of their stuff is good. It's just, I'm just saying in particular with the Sega stuff, because that's usually what people know ad games for, is that for that Sega plugin thing, like the first one that's like that little tiny one that just has composite.
It has a cartridge slot,
which has the really bad audio. And then the newer one, which you have, which is better, at least in terms of the old.
There's some problems I'll get into.
But there are issues I have seen firsthand.
There was a specific game we tried that I was like, that he owns that I don't. Let's try this one. And we were like, what?
Something happened. You can look forward to that in his video.
Yeah, when I get to that. I am planning to do it soon, by the way. Like, I've been talking about it.
If he hasn't stressed it enough.
But yeah, the reason I wanted to talk about that is that's a perfect example of not how to handle these situations, not how to handle this stuff. And with the stuff with Atari and Coleco and stuff, whatnot, they also were poorly handled situations where they didn't give enough information and they were blatantly lying to people. So I'm hoping with this Intellivision Emiko thing that, it's hard to not want to trust Tommy Tallarico, because he just seems like such a genuine guy. Yeah, and he obviously cares about the community. But I'm hoping that it's not another one of these situations. That it's not promising, and then not delivering, and then aiming for things that aren't you're just not going to meet. So, that's basically all I have to say about it. Is there any other thoughts you want to add to anything we've talked about before we wrap it up?
I guess maybe just what would be the future of these type of things, specifically with I guess plug and play stuff. There's of course the possibility of an N64 Classic, which might be a bit more pricey, like you said, because there are some. I wouldn't say because of the titles, but I want to say mostly because of the controllers. Because if you're gonna manufacture new controllers with analog sticks, I imagine they might be a bit more pricey as a result. And if you include, and this is a 4-player system too, by the way, so even if you include just 2 controllers, that might still be a bit as pricey or even more pricey than the Super Nintendo Classic. And I'm sure the selection of games will be fine. But of course, a lot of people's expectations will be if they only have a very casual knowledge of this sort of thing, where it's well, wait, where's Banjo-Kazooie? And it's no, a lot of rare games are not going to be on there because it's rare. Unless Microsoft has them, except for Donkey Kong 64.
Unless they got to deal with Microsoft, so
Donkey Kong 64 is the only rare game that could possibly be on there because it's Donkey Kong
from the N64 era, anyways.
But
that makes me think of another thing that I forgot to mention. The patent on the N64 ran out. And that's why I think that Nintendo's doing that. They're probably going to do this because now people can make FPGA systems of the N64. So we're going to be seeing clones of the N64, like that possible Analog NT one that could be coming out. So I'm excited for that, because even if there's a shitty clone console, if it does 720p and it doesn't look like crap, then I might spend the money to get one of them.
Too bad it sounds like farts.
Yeah, exactly. As long as it doesn't sound like the Resident Evil basement music.
Yeah, for the one room that it's in the entire game.
But yeah, that's something that's very exciting too. So there's a lot to be excited about in the future of this stuff for sure, especially, millionth time I've talked about Intellivision Emiko, but
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely the markets for it. It's just we hope that it doesn't like crash and burn.
Yeah,
like because I think once people, I think the limits for the plug and play stuff will be like once the N64 Classic, if it comes up, people will be like, okay, that's fine. We don't need a GameCube Classic.
Yeah.
Although GameCube re-releases would be nice, Nintendo.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah,
but yeah, and then the clone systems, there's always going to be more newer versions of these things coming out. Whether or not you want ease of use or as perfectly authentic and best video picture quality you can have, that depends on how much you're willing to invest in that kind of thing. And with the prospect of brand new systems coming out, like you said, with the Intellivision, what was it called? Emiko. Okay, yeah, and that is actually pretty cool because while stuff like the Ouya didn't do so hot, there's stuff like this could do well, especially if you have such prominent industry figures like Tommy Tallarico really putting their heart and soul into this type of thing.
Yeah, and again, it's somebody who's more trustworthy than the people who are running Atari or Coleco.
Yeah, so there could be a potential, maybe not a huge, but a potential like uprising of these type of like little micro indie consoles where it's like, hey, you can play these type of things, but that's just like pure speculation, though.
If the Fairchild Channel F Classic comes out, I think we'll have gone too far.
Well, yes, and then wasn't the part of the video game crash of '83 the reason that all these systems came out? So then we'll have like a micro console crash because of all of that. Yeah, it's like history just repeats itself.
They'll be putting them in landfills,
and then 30 years later they'll make a documentary about how.
Yeah. But yeah, that's basically our thoughts on the whole thing. This is the part of the podcast where we talk about promotions and stuff. Blondy, is there anything you want to promote that you've been working on or anything that's been released recently?
Well, the most recent thing that I've released was I did a They Made sequel on Medieval 2. And I actually did that in collaboration with a good friend of ours, fellow River City gamer, CXCR. So, if you want to check out that, you can go to my channel and see that if you want. In terms of stuff coming up, well, I know you kept stressing about the whole Act Games Sega HD thing that you want to do, but I might think about doing something with the Retron 5.
Yeah,
so
that'd be pretty neat, actually.
Yeah, I mean, because I've already I've kind of already spoiled a few opinions and things and advantages that obviously you can do with this. But of course, I still want to do a full video on it in some capacity.
Yeah, exactly.
And other than that, I think that's about it, really. Other than just look forward to whatever else I do on my channel in terms of reviews and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. For me, I do have that At Games thing's really going to be my next thing. That and con videos, because I have now 3 conventions worth of con videos.
Yeah, like EGLX back in March.
Yeah. Hey, EGLX happened last weekend, so it's topical.
No, that's the different EGLX.
Yeah, this one didn't have like guests from normal boots. And stuff. But yeah, that is, the con videos are coming up. I'm not really going to do a Remembrance Day or a Christmas review this year, just because I'm just like, for the Remembrance Day idea I had, I'm really stretching on that idea. So I'm like, I'm just going to put this on the shelf. And
what would you do for Remembrance Day other than a Call of Duty game?
Well, to be like, it's not really a secret at this point. I was going to do Sengoku Basara because it's a war game. Eventually.
Okay.
But I was going to do the whole series, but I realized I don't have enough time to record footage for all these games. And so I decided that I'm not going to do this. It's just, and also because I had planned to do 3 Halloween reviews, which I did do. I did 3 Halloween reviews. Thankfully, I beat my record.
Yeah, my Medieval 2 one was one as well. So.
Yeah, exactly. So I just not giving myself enough time. Plus going to Youmacon, which is where we're at right now, and having time to edit another video, sort of thing. So and with Christmas, like the other one, I'm just like, I really don't have a solid idea for it.
Not that there really isn't much like Christmassy.
Yeah, I kind of pulled it all with my Home Alone 2 review.
Because with Halloween, a lot of people do Halloween because it's like it's spooky times and there's a lot of Halloween themed stuff in video games.
So So I'm basically just going to focus on other videos that I need to do. I have one more Mega Man the Abridged Game episode I'd like to do before the year's over, but we'll see what happens. So that, and also more podcasts, Let's Plays stuff. 16-Bit Winter is just begun at the time this video is going to be released. So if anybody wants to join in on that and play 16-bit games from November up until the end of March, I'll have the intro will be available public by now, and the rules will be up on the Facebook page and whatnot. So that's something to look forward to as well. I've already started recording my first game for it, so that's happening. So yeah, and for social media and ways you can follow us, first off, your YouTube channel is, you just search for Blonde Guy Gamer.
It's just Blonde Guy Gamer, yeah.
Just search for Blonde Guy Gamer. What social medias can people follow you on?
I pretty much just have a Twitch, which it's mostly for like updates and posts and stuff, but I do occasionally.
Twitch is for updates?
Sorry, I meant Twitter. They both sound similar. Give me a break. Yeah. But I don't have a Twitch. I can't really stream. My internet's too shitty. But yeah, I do have my Twitter for that. And other than that, I just have a Patreon for my videos. And that's it, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also, you have access to the River City Gamers Facebook page, which you do post sometimes your videos too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also part of that site too. Mm-hmm. So it's like
rivercitygamers.com, right? So obviously, you guys know where to find me. Let's Play channel Zeromaster LP, review channel Zeromaster Reviews, Twitter Zeromaster, Patreon Zeromaster, all the other stuff is Zeromaster LP. I stream twice a week on Twitch. Thursdays and Tuesdays, I said that backwards, at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, except for the week that I'm at Youmacon for Thursday, because I'm at Youmacon, so I'm not going to do a stream that day, but it's already past that. So yeah, and if you would like to get early access to the podcast and my other videos, or like to get your name in the credits of the video version of the podcast, backing me on Patreon will give you the benefits like that, as well as other things like behind the scenes stuff and little extras that I'm working on as well. So anyways, that's going to do it for this episode of the Hunter Base Podcast. Thanks, Monty, for agreeing to do this.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here for your podcast first time too.
Yeah, exactly. I'd like to have you on more too.
But yeah, I'd be down.
Just there was the whole clusterfuck with things that CJ and I had to do. So I promised there was no more My Hero Academia for the rest of the year. So
yeah,
I'm keeping good on that promise.
That very popular anime that you guys like, you'll never ever talk about it again.
Oh, we'll talk about it again probably when the 4th season's over. But
yeah, and then there'll be another 4-hour podcast about that.
God, don't even remind me. Okay, anyways. Let's not make this podcast 4 hours. Let's end it here. Thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for listening. And I will see you next time. And thanks again to Blondie.
Yeah.
See you later, guys.
Bye.
All right.